Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
So Charles has been rewriting his will, not the crown properties, not Buckingham Palace, but his personal estates, the ones he owns outright and controls entirely himself. And people close to the palace are describing it as one of the most significant internal decisions he's made since his coronation. And the way this entire thing has unfolded is genuinely one of the most revealing royal stories I've had to piece together. Because this isn't about property anymore. This is about Camilla's future and the quiet war that's been brewing for 30 years. Camilla has spent 30 years getting away with things. Every time the public thought it was finally over for her, she found a way to survive it. And honestly, it started to feel like nothing could touch her. But if Anne holds meaningful influence over how these estates are managed between now and then, who gets access, who gets welcomed, who doesn't, then Camilla's future looks nothing like the one she spent 30 years planning. What she did next tells you she already knows. Subscribe first, because this story runs deeper than you think. To understand why Camilla is panicking, you first need to understand what she's losing. Here's what most people don't realize about Balmoral and Sandringham. They aren't like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. Those belong to the crown. They belong to the nation. The monarch lives in them but doesn't own them. Balmoral and Sandringham are different. Charles owns them outright. He inherited them from his mother, who inherited them from her father. They pass down through private inheritance, the same way any family home does, through a will. And that distinction changes everything for Camilla, because everything she has built inside those two estates, every Christmas gathering, every summer her children spent there, every quiet weekend that made her family feel like they belonged, all of it rests on one thing: Charles. Getting accepted is not the same as belonging, and that's the distinction people don't stop to consider. Camilla didn't marry into the monarchy the way Diana did young, before the public had formed an opinion. She came in through the back door, 20 years after being branded the reason the first marriage failed. The palace spent years rehabilitating her. Years of careful press management, strategic appearances, calculated silence, and it worked. She got the coronation and the crown. She got the title everyone said she'd never have. You really have to admire the audacity. But the moment Charles dies, that foundation disappears. And sources inside the palace say Charles is confronting this reality now. He's watched William remove Camilla's grandson from Windsor. He watched Camilla's children not get invited to Sandringham at Christmas, while Beatrice and Eugenie, daughters of the disgraced Andrew, were still given a seat at the table. He sees where his son is heading, and people close to the crown say the estate arrangements he's been reviewing reflect exactly that. William was 15 years old when his mother sat in front of a BBC camera and told the entire world that her marriage had 3 people in it. He spent nearly 30 years watching Camilla occupy spaces that once belonged to Diana. He's never forgotten. Well, no one should, and Charles knows it. Here's how this actually works. Most people assume that when a king dies, everything automatically passes to the next king, and everyone else just adapts. But it's not that simple. Balmoral and Sandringham pass to William the moment Charles dies. That's settled. What happens in between is not. Charles can decide right now who holds influence over those estates during the transition, who oversees the staff, who controls access, who, in practical terms, gets welcomed through those gates, and who doesn't. Camilla assumes she knows the answer. She's been by his side for 20 years. In her mind, that question was already settled long ago. It wasn't. Now think about who that person is. Because what Charles needs for Balmoral and Sandringham isn't someone with the strongest claim, it's someone with the steadiest hand. And that's where Anne comes in. Anne has managed Gatcombe Park, her private estate in Gloucestershire, for nearly 50 years. Queen Elizabeth bought it for her in 1976. Her children Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall live on the grounds with their families. She runs it with precision, an estate that works exactly the way it's supposed to. That track record matters, because when you put Anne's name next to Camilla's in this context, the contrast is uncomfortable. Anne has never generated a single headline that hurt the monarchy, never needed rehabilitation, never required years of PR to make her presence feel legitimate. Camilla required all of those things, and sources say that reality is weighing heavily on the conversations around Charles's estate arrangements right now. Now here's where it gets specific. Ray Mill House went first. For those who don't know, Ray Mill is the private Wiltshire property Camilla has owned since 1996. She bought it the year after her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles, when she was the most hated woman in Britain and needed somewhere entirely her own. Earlier this year, she quietly transferred it to her children's representatives. Land registry documents surfaced, the Daily Mail caught it, and most people scrolled past without a second thought. I know you did too, but I find that transfer fascinating. You don't give away your refuge unless you already know what's coming for the bigger properties. She was securing what she could control before someone else started making decisions about what she couldn't. And here's the irony. Charles had already moved to protect her. In early 2025, he spent £3.75 million of his own private funds buying the old mill, the property directly next door to Ray Mill, specifically to prevent it from becoming a wedding venue. An insider described it as a pragmatic solution, a sound investment that maintained Camilla's privacy and continued enjoyment of her much-loved home. Read that phrase carefully. Continued enjoyment of her much-loved home, the home she has since transferred away from herself. Charles was buying protection for a property Camilla was already planning to give up. That tells you everything about the timeline and what both of them already knew. Meanwhile, Anne's positioning tells a different story. People close to the palace suggest it's been equally deliberate. She attended Sandringham at Christmas 2025, walked to St. Mary Magdalene Church alongside Charles and William, stood exactly where she always stands, said nothing publicly about any of it. Camilla's children were not there. The official explanation, the gathering was private and family-focused. Anne was there. She has never left. And that contrast is the whole point. Anne doesn't need to be introduced into these arrangements the way Camilla did. She belongs there by default. What's being restructured is simply the acknowledgement of what has always been true, that when Charles dies, Anne carries the institutional memory of those estates, not the woman who arrived through a controversial marriage 20 years ago. Here's the uncomfortable reality Camilla is facing right now. She can't fight this, not publicly, not privately, not through lawyers, not through the press. Every avenue she's ever used to protect her position is either closed to her now or actively working against her. Think about her playbook. For 20 years, Camilla's survival strategy has been the same. Stay quiet. Let Charles handle it. Wait for the noise to die down. She outlasted the public hatred, outlasted the tabloid campaigns, outlasted everyone who said she'd never be accepted. Her entire method is patience and proximity to power. But proximity to power only works when the person holding that power is on your side. Charles is 77 years old and fighting cancer. Sources say his energy for managing family dynamics has significantly diminished over the past 18 months. He loves Camilla. That much has never been in question. But loving someone and fighting their battles on multiple fronts are two completely different things. So here's the trap. Protecting Camilla's position would mean telling William directly that Anne's role needs to be reduced. William wouldn't accept that, and sources say Charles already knows it. It would mean overriding decisions William has already started implementing, methodically, deliberately, the way William does everything that actually matters, and it would mean positioning himself publicly against both his heir and his sister, at a moment when his health requires him to conserve every ounce of political capital. That's a fight Charles simply cannot afford right now. And here's what makes Camilla's situation so dangerous. She understands all of this. She's not naive. She spent 30 years reading this family with extraordinary precision. She knows what Charles can and cannot do. She knows what William is building. And she knows that Anne's silence on all of this is not neutrality. So what does she do? She moves Ray Mill House into her children's hands. She secures what she can. She makes herself financially resilient before the conversation about the estates becomes too loud to ignore. It's actually a smart move, not because it solves anything, but because it's the only move available to someone who has already lost the larger argument and knows it. So step back and look at the full picture for a moment, because when you put all of this together, the estate restructuring, Anne's positioning, Ray Mill transferred into the children's hands, Camilla's family absent from Sandringham, while bloodline royals kept their seats. What you're actually watching is not a property dispute. This is Diana's children finally holding the pen. For 30 years, the story of this family has been written by the people who survived the scandal. Charles shaped the narrative. Camilla rehabilitated herself inside it. The palace managed the press, controlled the optics, and slowly, successfully, made the woman who destroyed the fairy tale marriage into the woman sitting beside the king at every state occasion. That version of the story required everyone else to stay quiet. William stayed quiet. Anne stayed quiet. The institution absorbed the discomfort and kept moving because that's what institutions do. But quiet is not the same as forgiven, and patience is not the same as acceptance. Those close to Anne describe what happening inside those estate arrangements right now is something more considered and more permanent than revenge. Simple revenge would look like Camilla publicly humiliated, stripped of everything in one dramatic moment. That's not what this is. This is quieter than that, more deliberate. The kind of restructuring that doesn't generate a single headline on its own but adds up to something Camilla cannot undo. Because by the time anyone understands what happened, the decisions will already be locked in. Anne will have oversight. William will have the estates. Camilla's family will have Clarence House and Highgrove, and a future that depends entirely on the goodwill of a man whose mother she spent decades helping to sideline. And honestly, and I mean this, that outcome is not accidental. Charles is not a passive man making careless decisions in his final years. He is a king who understands legacy, who has spent his entire life thinking about what endures and what doesn't. The arrangements he is reportedly making now reflect a man who loves his wife and simultaneously understands that the institution he is leaving behind belongs to his son, not to her family, not to the people who arrived through her, to William, to Diana's son. The message from these estate arrangements is the same message that came from Windsor when Camilla's grandson was escorted out, the same message that came from Sandringham when her children weren't invited to Christmas. Every move pointing in the same direction, every decision adds one more brick to a wall that Camilla has no way to dismantle. She won the battle 30 years ago. She got Charles, the crown, and the coronation. The war was always about something else.